This year-end election cycle has been a lot. Trump charged his followers with poll watching, voter intimidation, and of course, there is the possible election result interference by the Supreme Court, Russia, QAnon, disinformation, and good old voter suppression. There's more, but we got to keep this moving, especially since it's not all bad. For some good news, 93 million Americans cast their ballots early, which is twice the amount of the people who voted early in 2016, and it's more than 2/3 of the total votes cast in 2016. Plus, a lot of those voters are young ages 18 to 29 and minorities like me, who are coming out in record numbers. I even got this nifty sticker. I really can't overstate how large this early voting turnout is. In Texas, 9.7 million people voted early, versus in 2016, fewer than 9 million people voted in the entire election. Can y'all imagine Texas being a swing state? Texas, as in, yeehaw, Texas in 2020 is a crazy year. As much as we want the results immediately, states have different procedures for counting early votes and mail-in ballots, and conclusive results could come days after election night, especially in battleground states like Pennsylvania. Although around half of Pennsylvanians are expected to vote absentee, those ballots started being processed this morning, which is not enough time to get results by tonight. Oddly enough, Florida seems to be doing just fine. Good, even, because they're used to doing mail-in ballots. As long as there's not another hanging Chad situation, we should know their results relatively early. Al Gore would be proud. Polls have also shown Democrats are more likely than Republicans to vote by mail. So with all these counting discrepancies, the initial day of voting tallies may lean to the right. However, given that Biden is ahead by an average of 10 points nationwide, even adjusted for the margin of error in 2016, this is still a Biden victory. Experts and polls all predict a Biden win. Alan Lichtman, whose 13-key system has correctly predicted the winner of each presidential election since Ronald Reagan in 1984, predicts Biden will win. Nate Silver, the editor-in-chief of 538, says there is an 89 out of 100 chance that Biden will win. And Michael Moore, who was one of the few pundits to correctly predict Trump's victory in 2016, predicts that the polls are still underrepresenting Trump's voters, and Biden's lead is much smaller than the polls represent. But Michael Moore predicts Trump has squandered his chance at re-election. So that sounds like to me. Now, this isn't to say that Biden is the progressive savior that we all wanted, but he's better than fascism. And it doesn't look like there'll just be a blue man in the White House. No, it looks like the whole group could be here this election. A blue man group joke in 2020. You know what? Why not? It's a weird year. Plus, it's true. Incumbent Republicans are really struggling as they try to hold the Senate and win back the House. South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham's Victorian orphan-style begging just isn't holding off Jamie Harrison's charm. Jon Ossoff is polling surprisingly well in Georgia, and Cal Cunningham is running a formidable race in North Carolina, which could all flip these previously red states. Even Mitch McConnell's hand is going blue. But wait, is this too good to be true?
Clearly an advantage for Secretary Clinton.
Donald Trump will take Ohio. Donald Trump will carry the state of Wisconsin. Tonight is turning out to be a real nail-biter. Donald Trump will carry the state of Florida.
I wouldn't call anything encouraging for Hillary Clinton at the moment, to be honest with you, my friend.
Wolf, the scene here is so different than it was a few hours ago.
Hillary Clinton has called Donald Trump to concede the race.
Please don't fuck this up, Biden. Please. Victory is literally in your hands. Okay, so maybe we should be cautiously optimistic. Only time will tell. Brace yourself. This could be a long night.
Yo, what is up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Political Culture. We are here on The Conversation, and I am Cody Smith, your host, and I'll be joined today by my co-host.
Destiny, and we're here on Election Day talking about all things polls and predictions. So, Cody, take it away.
Yeah, no problem. We want to get right into this. We want to get right down to brass tacks. The first thing we kind of want to talk about, there have been an extremely high number of early voters. 93 million, I believe, is the number, which is twice as much as it was in 2016. I myself being one of those, early voters. So the first question I kind of want to ask is, everyone, how was your experience voting in your state? I know for me, my first time voting in a major election, very easy. I kind of got in there. They directed me on what to do. I filled out a ballot and I was gone in like 5 minutes. But I also live in California. So just how has everyone's voting experience been so far? I want to go to Destiny before heading to our panelist.
Okay, so I live in New York, and it was pretty easy. Everyone was very happy online and talkative. They gave us pizza at the end. It took me like all of 5 minutes, and I loved it. It was so fun.
Let's go to Dean.
Yo, what's up? So I'm in Maryland, and my voting experience was really mild. We did mail-in ballots, and they got sent to the house. Mine actually came later than my family, so we waited, and we all went through sort of the information about the local elections as well as the national elections together, and then all made our decisions.
Awesome. Let's go to Hidea and then Lindsay.
So I voted from Arkansas, and I had a pretty great experience. It literally took me like 5 minutes. I will say though, I almost had to call the voter protection hotline because I've been like working with a bunch of justice of peace candidates, and I didn't see any on my ballot. So I was like, what's going on here? Why are these candidates listed? But it was all fine. Turns out none of my justice of peace, like where I live, are running for or up for re-election. So that's why I didn't have anyone, unfortunately.
And finally, let's go to Lindsay.
So my experience was relatively easy. I voted in person, and it sounds long, but it actually went by relatively fast. So I woke up at about 5:45. I got to my polling place at around 6, and they opened at 7. I wanted to get in line quick because I had to work that day. So I didn't have all day to wait. But once they opened at 7, I think I was out by 7:30. There was no voter intimidation, anything like that. People seemed to be pretty emphatic about wanting to vote. Because it was early, people weren't really talking or dancing, but there was a long line, and people seemed like they was just here to handle the vote. It was very fast, it was very efficient. In terms of COVID, they took a lot of efforts to make sure that we were distanced and things like that. So it was good. It was a solid experience.
Due to the severity of this election, each side has been working diligently to bring more people to the polls. How do y'all think that the record-breaking voter turnout affected the election results or will affect them? Let's start with Hidea.
Hidea, I believe you're muted.
Not anymore. Thank you. So as I was saying, I think that this earth-shattering records of early voter turnout is going to be a defining moment in this election and just overall critical for the Democrats. What I'm going to project win because of how the South is going to flip, particularly thinking about Texas, who their early voter turnout was more than their whole entire state's voter turnout. And so you also see things like that happening in Georgia, where they have 75% voter turnout. And so I think overall, Democrats' push to vote and to vote early, especially in the South, is going to be a large reason why they take back the Senate and take the White House.
Okay, Dean.
Yeah, I really agree with that sentiment. Especially amongst my group of friends, I have friends all up and down the East Coast and even some on the West Coast. There's been a large push to really get out there and to actively vote and, play your part. It's sort of your civic duty at this point. And I feel like it comes down to the fact of whether or not you're an upstanding person or an empathic person or somebody who cares about other people to a large margin. And so in dealing with that, we've seen a lot of voter activity in between all of my friends. I even have a friend in Chicago who is voting, I think, right now, probably.
Okay, Lindsay.
So I think that this wave of early voter turnout and record voting numbers so far is really going to benefit the Democratic Party. I think that young people and people of color will definitely go Democrat, and it's going to definitely put the Democrats at an advantage, in my opinion. 67% of Americans said they were more enthusiastic to vote in 2020 than in previous elections, and it's so far a 20% jump from 2016. So I definitely think that this election is a bit different. I think that there were certain factors that played in 2016 that won't necessarily be at play in 2020. I think that a lot of people in 2016 felt like it's obviously Hillary's election to win and it's going to be a blowout, but people are scared this time. People are nervous, as they should be. And I think that it's definitely going to benefit the Democratic Party. I think that the increase in voters is what's going to help turn the South, like Hidea and Dean mentioned. So I'm excited, honestly.
Yeah, I completely agree with that sentiment, and I kind of want to shift gears just a little bit to kind of talk about the result time, or the timing in which we'll get results. You know, we have states like Texas, Florida, Georgia, which, barring anything crazy, will get results relatively quickly. And then we have other states like Pennsylvania and North Carolina or Michigan, where those results can come in any variety of days down the line. What I want to ask you all is, how do you think that states' pending result times will affect the possibility of what the election day results will actually look like, accounting for voter suppression, the votes that have already been counted, day of voting? How do you think all of this is going to come together to affect the election results? And let's start with Hidea.
Cool. Yeah, so I think how it's going to affect the results and largely how the populace receives the results is going to depend on how Florida, Texas, and Georgia turn out. And so those results, we are kind of expecting to at least get those probably late into the night. But if Biden takes Florida, if Biden takes Georgia, if Biden takes Texas, or any combination, or even just one of those states, it becomes extremely hard to imagine a Trump presidency. And so I think at that point, people can start to feel more confident about Biden winning. However, if Biden loses all three of those states, then it's gonna get a little scary. But it's still like very possible paths for either of the candidates. And so I think those are the states I'll be watching to see if we're gonna have to wait until the end of the week to find out who's the next president of the United States.
And Lindsay, I know you have something to say on this as well. So can we hear from you?
Yeah, I am actually a little bit nervous. I think that the wait times, actually, I'll start with this. So the Trump administration has kind of suggested that they want these results by the end of the night, regardless of what happens. So I think that we might see things kind of skewed in the Republican favor. And I think that the Trump administration will try to suggest that we should stop counting votes. And I think that's quite disturbing. I do think that there will be a blue wave later in the night, but I'm actually quite nervous about how pending result times will impact the election. And it's not something that doesn't normally happen. You know, normally votes are not all counted by the end of election night. That's not the way things have ever been. But in this particular election, the Trump administration is kind of suggesting that if they don't have a result by the end of the night, that things are invalid, there's cheating, and then they might make it a legal battle. And it's very, very disturbing. I think that although I trust the polls a lot, I think that a lot of people are very nervous just because of what happened in 2016. And I do expect that there might be a few states in the South that'll turn blue, but I'm not sure. I think that at first they'll seem red, and I think that the Trump campaign will try to get things stopped when it's in their favor.
And last but not least, let's go to Dean.
I agree pretty directly with Lindsay's sentiment about sort of the skewed vision that comes with supporting the Republican side of the election. I think that, especially considering the abysmal results of each of the dates, and then on top of that, his policies and his terrible presentation, I think that Trump sort of has his back against the wall at this point. I think it would be honestly, in the terms of like in the art of war and in terms of strategy, it would be stupid of him not to try to stop votes at midnight. Like I don't see why he wouldn't. And I feel like he's definitely shown a side of himself, in fact, all of himself, that would be willing to do that in order to win. And so I think what the American people are facing right now is sort of a matter of, are we believing immediate fact? Are we waiting? And how much of this is propaganda? I think once we sort of diverge and delve through all of those different aspects of what we're dealing with, there'll be a clear answer. But I just, as a person, am worried about really the severity of what he's going to say, what the polls are going to say, how immediately people are going to take it, because Trump has a following and that following listens to him. And so when he comes out and says, I won the election at 11:59, you know, those people are going to believe that he won the election at 11:59. I think that lends itself to uproar and sort of just a disingenuous counting of the polls that could be potentially dangerous for a lot of people.
And Lindsay, I know you have something else you want to say on that point. So let's just shoot back to you real quick before moving on.
Yeah, I want to piggyback off of what Dean had said about what Donald Trump says and how it impacts his supporters. In response to the Supreme Court decision extending timeframes from states, Trump said they made a very dangerous situation, and I mean physically dangerous. So I really think that something to watch in this election is the result that this election has on Trump supporters. I know a lot of people are saying either way that, either way it goes, people will probably end up in civil unrest. But Trump supporters, we've already seen a little bit of action being taken. I don't know if you all heard about, there was a Biden bus that was followed by Trump cars, and they ran off the road, or they tried to run the car off the road and things of that sort. Donald Trump has, suggested to his base that they be poll watchers, as though we don't already have people at the polls. He suggested so many different things that it's very disturbing. And I'm concerned about if they really want this election to be fair. I think that the attempt to suppress votes is really because the Trump administration knows that if everyone votes, they shouldn't win. And I really think that's the entire point of why they want to suppress votes, why they wanted those ballots from Harris County. I don't know if you all heard about that, thrown away. They know that if everyone votes, they're not going to win, or at least they're not supposed to win. So they want to steal this election.
Hidayah or Dean, feel free to jump in off of that point.
Yeah, I mean, just really quickly, I think the way the Trump campaign has been behaving probably since like April is just reminds me of a lot of like when you play Monopoly and you notice you're losing, all of a sudden the rules are different. All of a sudden, like, this is not how the game is supposed to be played. Oh, you're cheating. Oh, this and that. When you notice you're like behind and you have to play catch up. And so this is what he's been doing. And now it's just going to be, I don't know how it can be more extreme than like literally saying, oh, violence is going to be in the street if these judges do these decisions. But I know into the night, once the clock hits 12, as you guys have mentioned, like he's going to think that this election is over. And it's really going to be frightening, mostly because he's at least from, if you take a look back at it, he does have some standing to say, oh, I may have won. If the early votes show, if they count votes that were casted on election day and not necessarily the absentee ballots, it may look like Trump has won. And so for the first time, he may actually be relying on real statistics that technically show, sure, he's in the lead, but that, as we know, is not the full story. As many Americans probably do not know, there's absentee ballots that are not oftentimes counted at the same time as the early day ballots. So it's going to cause, as Dean said, a lot of confusion, a lot of chaos, and I'm just in for the ride. I don't know what's going to happen, but hopefully, like I said earlier, Biden can have a clear victory in the other 3 states.
And Dean?
Yeah, just bringing it back. I think what the American people are looking at for the first time is a real blatant and public act of injustice on the scale that we're seeing it. I think that it's a completely unprecedented situation for all of us to deal with. And I think that there's an element to which Trump is definitely preying on that confusion and that chaos that's caused to sway whichever way he wants the vote to go. I think that often when you review history, whether it's throughout school or just sort of in your own public nature, there's a lot of talk about oh, they didn't know that they were going to be in the history books. But I think for the first time in the American public, we know that we're going to be in the history books. So I feel like that pressure on top of the fact that so many people might be discounted and so many people might even be skewed throughout this vote is really going to mess with those final results and however the American people react moving forward, which I think is my primary worry.
Okay, so despite our fear, poll and experts alike are expecting there to be a blue wave across the country. Do you guys think that we can trust and believe in these polls? Let's start with Lindsay.
I think that the average person is going to look at the poll and say, they said this in 2016, so I don't know what to believe. Personally, I do think that there were a few factors at play in 2016 that just aren't necessarily at play in 2020, or at least not at play to the degree at which they were at play in 2020. I do think that there are a few different scenarios that might happen, but for the most part, I think that the polls are right about there being a blue wave. I was reading and I found that in Pennsylvania, half of the Pennsylvania population is expected to vote absentee, and those ballots won't be processed they weren't processed until 7 a.m. this morning. So the election results there will start to lean Republican, and then they might become blue as time goes on. I think that Texas could possibly flip. I don't expect it, but if it happened, I wouldn't be like, oh my God, how'd that happen? I think that Georgia could possibly flip, but I expect results from Georgia tonight. I'm nervous though. I think that like a few of my co-panelists have said that like Trump will try to claim results tonight, regardless of what happens, regardless of if anyone makes it to 270. But in terms of the polls, I think they're accurate, but I think that people aren't going to believe them because of what happened in 2016.
Let's go with Hidea and then Dean.
So I, like Lindsay kind of touched on, am scarred and traumatized from the polls based on 2016. But even more so after taking too many methodology and statistical analysis classes this semester in the past, I don't trust the polls, especially when you look at the questions that they ask and all of the different biases, and especially considering how polarized our nation is. I mean, it's hard for people to admit I'm a Trump supporter, especially like over the phone, as in many places, in many circles, it's kind of an embarrassing thing. And as we saw in 2016, people will literally lie to cover up to cover up how they truly feel and how they're truly prioritizing, being self-interested and being considered a racist, since that's kind of the common correlation, Trump supporter, racist, that sort of thing. So I don't trust the polls, but that doesn't necessarily mean I don't think that they're right, if that makes sense. I just don't necessarily trust the methodology. I'm not going to put my coins in the hat for this election.
Okay, Dean?
I definitely agree with that. I feel like in terms of how much they've sort of mentioned this idea of a blue wave, I feel like whoever's predicting these polls could really be blowing smoke. I think I also have a significant amount of trauma due to the 2016 election. And I feel like there was a lot of optimistic, especially in the favor of blue during that election. Trump was still being ridiculous and he was still being publicly disrespectful. But then we had 4 years of Trump. And so I think in seeing that all of the American people are cautious, I think to that point also, it's a little presumptuous to say that, there might be this blue wave. I think that it definitely is likely. There are a lot of decent people in the United States, but there are also a surprising number of people who did not release their support of Trump throughout all of this, which I find not only impressive, but a little bit, nauseating. And so it's really going to be up to that sort of back and forth to see who wins here and who's able to pull it out.
Yeah, and on that point, I kind of want to just get into our last question for the night. Who is going to pull it out? Who do you all think is going to win and why? I want to start with, for this question, Hidea, just your prediction on who you think is going to win and your reason for that belief.
So I think, fingers crossed, I think Biden is going to win. And I think in large part it's going to be due to the South. The South is going to show, don't sleep on us. we have something to say, and also in large part due to Stacey Abrams and the work that she's been doing to not only register voters in Georgia, but across the country. And so I think his win is going to be largely due to the support that comes from the South.
Let's go to Dean and then Lindsay.
I really think that I wouldn't say any necessarily a geographic demographic, but I do think the age group that we're in, those college age students, people from 18 to about 25, are really going to show out because we have access to social media. We're still in that sort of combine of being affected by each other's political ideals socially. And so I think there's definitely been a pressure amongst this age grouping to go and vote, whether it's for the purpose of a trend or it actually affects you and you care about it. Well, it affects everyone, but sort of more of a noble cause than it's the public thing to do. I do think that the number of us who are participating will start to swing the votes. And I think that's going to continue on into the future as we become that sort of 30-year-old class and then a 40-year-old class. And so I think this is the start of a pretty large trend moving into American history. And I think that it's really up to whoever's running the polls and whoever's recognizing these demographics to really take a chance and look at that.
I would say I agree with my panelists that I expect Biden to pull this election off. And I think that because I think he's likely to maintain the states that Hillary Clinton had, and I think he's going to gain some. And Donald Trump didn't blow Hillary Clinton out of the water. So I think that Biden should be able to pull it off. I also want to mention that I know we had briefly talked about hidden Trump supporters, but I was watching the news today and there might be some hidden Biden supporters, people who are Republicans, but they don't want to tell their friends that they're voting for Biden. That could happen. I think that for some of them in their circles, it might be embarrassing, but let's be real. The way COVID has impacted us as a people see it every day. They're constantly reminded of it. And I definitely think it's had a negative outlook on people. I think that Donald Trump has just lost supporters. And I don't think that Biden has lost anyone that Hillary had. I also want to mention or re-mention something that was brought up in the monologue at the beginning. Lichtman, he's perfectly predicted every presidential race since 1984. And he predicted Trump's surprise in 2016. So I definitely believe his prediction for 2020. So I definitely think that Biden has the opportunity. And I would be surprised if he didn't pull it out. In fact, I wouldn't only be surprised, I would think that there was something wrong going on, honestly, if he didn't.
And, thank you for that, Lindsay. Last, I want to go to my co-host, Destiny. What are your predictions?
Personally, I think that Biden is going to win. And part of that is because due to 2020, there's a lot of stuff has happened. And I just think that it's brought like an awakening to non-people of color. And they just feel that they just learned a little more about into our lives and how we have to live under the American politics. And then another part of that is because I am in this blue bubble, like we are kind of chilling in New York. Everyone's just very hopeful. And I feel like that energy has just rubbed off on me. So it could be a little ignorant of me thinking that we're just going to sweep the country. But I just think that we're going to be okay, I guess.
Yeah, and I largely agree with all your sentiments. I agree. I think Biden's gonna pull this one out. Little stressed. Little's the wrong word. Very stressed. I do have trust issues with elections because the only election I have been even somewhat of an adult for felt as though I was robbed. So politically, that's kind of just been chilling with me for a while. But I don't know. I do feel some sense of optimism. And I feel like that sense of optimism, that sense of cautious optimism is being felt all throughout our country. I know a lot of people don't like Joe Biden. I am one of those people, but at the same time, I also, I understand the necessity of this presidency. I understand that there are things riding on this besides just the presidency that are very important to me. And even if they're not important to me, they're important to people that I love, to people that I know, to my friends, to my family. And, for that reason, it's important that we all get out there, we all vote. And, we get Donald Trump out of office because this isn't a matter of, personal preference. It's a matter of what we need as a people to survive, what this world needs as a people to survive. And it's for that reason I think people can see that. I think Americans across the country can see that. And I think Americans across the country are going to rise to that challenge. And we're going to get this clown out of office. And so with that, we're going to wrap up our time here on this episode of Political Culture, on this episode of The Conversation. Thank you all so much for joining us. And we will see you all next time. Have a great night. And don't forget to go vote for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris.
Biden-Harris 2020.
Biden-Harris 2020. Let's do it.
Oh.
Yes.
Happy election watch party.
You-
Yes. Get out there.